going to present a brand new model that me and Teresa came up with last week. So
that's what we do.
Yeah, yes, the two of us.
So this hasn't been tested and it's not been peer-reviewed.
Yes,
oh, absolutely,
absolutely not.
Not in any way.
That's not the way we work. So I was asked to talk about stories and quests, and I made this presentation. Before we talk, and to the new ones, like at any time, raise your hand, or if you want to say something, ask something, just do it, and we'll maybe end up in some interesting conversation. Before we talk about stories and quests, I want to talk a little bit about different LARPing traditions, because that will be the backdrop to talking about stories and quests for me in this presentation. If we look at this world map that is put together, I think, by Eirik Fatland, Norwegian interaction designer, who is very interested in LARP and LARP design and LARP history. He actually has an excellent talk about LARP history. So for those of you who thought that my first initial talk about LARP history earlier today was a bit short, he has like a 45-minute talk going through different parts of the LARPing history. Here we can see the confirmed LARP activity confirmed during the last year, and also the rumored or low frequency activity. So LARPing is actually going on in quite a lot of countries. The whole of Europe, USA, Canada, some LARPing in South America, and the whole of Russia, and we have Australia and South Africa as well.
Has you got New Zealand on there?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Greenland, which I think is that because it's part of Denmark
Yeah.
geopolitically, or because they actually do LARP in Greenland?
The Danish LARPers have actually been to Greenland and done a LARP, which was quite a funny story in itself. Like they were LARPing and there was a lot of snow everywhere, and the kids, they were getting really, really wet because of all the snow, and the Danish organizers, having LARPed with Danish kids, they started getting really nervous because how would they handle all the cranky kids? Because everyone was like soaked after just one half hour into the LARP. But what they didn't realize was that all the kids in Greenland was used to this. So it wasn't a problem at all, as it would have been in Denmark. And I'm going to go through 4 LARPing traditions based on my own very biased views of talking to people, more or less. So I don't have any sources for what I'm about to say right now. We'll start off with North America. North America, a tradition that has 2 parts to it. First, we have the big fantasy game part, very often monthly events, MMORPG-like quests, like a quest structure in many of the games that's quite similar to the quests you found in the online role-playing game quests. And focus on XP and rules. Like some rule books are actually, I think, over 100 pages long, which is, that is jaw-dropping to me as a Nordic LARPer. Like, who would actually read through all of this? I wouldn't, but it's a different tradition.
They're required to buy it every year as part of the membership.
Yeah.
It's actually a sales tactic.
And there's also an alternative scene, the theater-style games. But I watched the documentary I Play Make Believe, where they had both the fantasy LARP scene in it and the theater style scene. And the theater style scene was also had, at least in the examples they show, game mechanics that were very gamist, if we're going to use that word, even though it was theater style.
What was the documentary called, sorry?
I Play Make Believe.
I Play Make Believe.
Yes.
Screw it, I'll play it.
Yeah, Screw It, I'll Play Make Believe, it's
Right.
called.
Okay.
And there's another one called Monster Camp that is about a specific campaign. Now, I talked to some of you during the discussion. The interesting thing, if we look at the North American LARP is how the legislative nature of America actually shapes the LARPing culture there, something that Lizzie Stark, a journalist and a LARPer, talked about, which is in Sweden, everyone is covered by some kind of basic insurance. So I can actually host a game, and if people come to my game and break a leg, I don't have to pay for their medical costs just because I hosted the game. Whilst in USA, if you want to host a game, then you have to have insurance covering all the participants. And the easiest way for that is to have a company hosting the game, having an insurance for all the participants. And that then entails that you have to have, to make money hosting the game as a company. So you want regular events, these monthly events, to be able to make as much money as possible, because you need to spend time working it as a company to be able to have those insurances. So this is the short version. And that influences like this structure, this campaign-like structure with this weekly or monthly events. And also, because these insurances are quite expensive, so another way to make money is to say that if you come to one of our games, you will be rewarded this or that much XP as a base for just showing up. But if you miss out on an event, you can still pay some money and receive that experience point retroactively. If you want people to keep buying into this, you want them really attached to their character and actually leveling their character. So the rules system is also influenced by this, that you can die a certain amount of times, because if you have to start from scratch again, then they might drop out of the campaign, and then you lose a customer. So we have like different traditions in this country that doesn't have to do with LARP, that actually shapes the LARPing culture.
The Vampire LARP of the US, and it also gives XP for charity donations and for blood donations, appropriately. So you can get XP for Vampire Academy by giving blood.
Yes.
There was a story I heard about recently. They offered XP for a charity donation where you donate cans of food. And a group of players got together en masse, come to the warehouse, and bought a pallet of the cheapest possible canned corn they could get, split it up for the maximum share for each one, so they power gamed the charity donation to get the max XP for the least money.
Yeah, more of a gamist tradition. You see this guy here, it's not very clear on the picture, he's actually wearing a fake beard. He's playing a dwarf. Do you remember the other guy from that I talked about earlier today when I said, remember this guy if you're going to my lecture about Story and Quest? A friend of mine, actually Teresa's brother, he was talking to some of his LARPing friends in USA, and they were talking about the cool LARPs they had been to, showing some photos. And my friend called Theo, he thought that it looked kind of crappy, like they have just taken a tablecloth and had as a cape and things like that. So he thought, I'll send some cool pictures to them, then they'll see how cool the Scandinavian LARPing is. So he sent, among the pictures, he sent this picture with the dwarf in the real chainmail that he has handcrafted himself. And he has grown like this big dwarf beard for 4 years to be able to play this dwarf, like totally immersing into this character. And he thought that they will shit in their pants. This is so cool compared to the US LARP. But their reaction was, so he's playing a dwarf, you say? But that's a real beard. Yeah, so what? Well, the fake beard is the symbol for the character class dwarf. So how could we tell his character class if he's wearing a real beard? So that's like, and that little story gives you like a point of view at how you approach LARPing, because it's so important, at least in the campaign that they played, to know the character class, because that latched on to what rule system they were supposed to use against their character class, and so on and so on. And also having the costumes be more of a symbolic nature than being representative. Here are other pictures from American events. Here they're playing out a fight in some way. Then we have the UK LARPs. Now, once again, this is from my point of view. More sophisticated costumes and plots than the US LARP. and also more alcohol from what I've heard.
Yeah, they don't have drinks at US bars because of the insurance.
Yeah, I
they,
think so.
They represent it with the
Yeah.
we obviously drink.
And their culture is just much more against alcohol. I've been to American Vampire LARPs. The American membership were not allowed any alcohol, even in the bar between events at the convention. Whereas UK players decided for a UK policy, which meant of course they could.
Yeah. And here we can see that like the costumes and everything is taken a step up from the previous pictures. I think these are pictures from Hero Quest and Hero Fest. I think there is something called here in the UK. But also, of course, there are also more theatre like and Nordic style like LARPing in the UK. But if we look at like the fancy LARP and the fancy campaigns.
So is this different in terms of, is it less rules than the one in America, or?
Slightly
less, but still kind of rules heavy, and still campaigns with reoccurring LARPs more often than in, for instance, Sweden. In Sweden, if you have a campaign, then you probably just do one LARP a year, and it's the village LARP where everyone sits and sings again.
Right.
So Hero Quest is a linear system, which means they probably run events every week.
Right.
As a result of that, their production values tend to be slightly lower.
Yeah, because I mean that's
There are fest LARPs in the UK which tend to have fewer rules, although it's still 12-page rule books rather than 100 or none, where the production values are higher than you'd see here, so sort of order of magnitude more.
right.
But anyway, that's just
Hero Fest was particularly targeted at new LARPers. I was at their first ever event, so the costumes were quite basic. Those were organised by the tabards that you get a particular faction are wearing in the bottom left picture. And then the rule system was very simple.
But there are LARPs. I mean, talking to people in the UK about role-playing games and LARPs, I'm often faced with people talking to me about historical reenactment, but that's different.
It's entirely.
Yeah, that's different. So I've left out all the things that are reenactment in this.
Although the village sounds quite like historical your Swedish village.
Yeah, but it's not historically accurate at all.
Right.
It's like that's more like in the old fantasy times,
Right.
And it has become like a even if it is set in a medieval setting, it still becomes like that quite non-historically accurate LARP setting, like Swedish tradition LARP setting in a way. Even though all the costumes and things like that might have very historically accurate förlagor. What's it called?
Models.
Yeah,
They're
models.
But
But it might be like, if you would be an historian, you would see that this is from the 12th century and this is from the 15th century, and it would be a big mix-up between that and music written today for the campaign, which is like totally off when it comes to medieval music, which didn't at all have these harmonics and things like that.
And also the main thing, I mean, why it isn't reenactment is that these people are playing characters. And when you're doing reenactment, if someone would say, "Who are you?" Well, I'm dressed as a tailor from this and this era.
Oh, well, I mean, my daughter and mother take part in these reenactments, and they definitely play characters. But they're absolutely obsessed with historical accuracy.
But that's how you would. But that's where the line goes in Scandinavia. I would say reenactment, because the reenactors are very insistent that they don't LARP.
Right.
It's like it's very important to them to say that they're not LARPers, they are reenactors, and they don't, play act.
Yeah. And once again, this is like the very broad general view. I'm really painting with the broad brush here. And then we travel to the Nordic countries. This is from a LARP called Mad About the Boy.
It's Morgan Jarl again.
Yeah, it's Morgan Jarl again, naked. And he's crying in the corner. Nordic countries are more into relationship, immersion, collective narrative, many genres, and a complete disinterest in experience points and experience point system. I haven't seen, since I started LARPing in 2001, I haven't seen one single experience point system.
They died in the 90s. When
Yeah.
I started, they were still around, and by 97, I think they were gone.
And I did see rules for health points in 2001, but I haven't seen any for 8 years.
Weave of Fate still has hit points.
Yeah.
As in, you have a number, for most forest cats it's 4, that's how many hit points you have. But that's it.
Yeah.
So,
And some of the LARPs being more artistic in nature, some wanting to explore some things. Mad About the Boy was an all-female LARP, which was set in a world where there existed no men. So, then during the LARP, in like the second act, the last surviving man, it was kind of a post-apocalyptic world, enters the LARP, and it was all about exploring how you could like turn the tables of gender roles, the man being the object in the LARP and the women having all the agencies. They ran it 2 times with an all-female cast except for the man, and a second time where men could play the females of the women of the LARP as well. And then they've set it up again and again after that. But we have a lot of different genres. Here we have once again pictures from Heart of War, real chainmail, real plate armor, uniforms. What do you say? Uniforms. No. But consistent uniforms throughout the group. Here we have bordering to military simulation, dressed up as special task unit from Russia. Up here we have a Tolkien LARP called Utumnu, and here we have a Lovecraftian LARP played out in a village with as accurate 20s or 30s clothing as possible. So there are very many genres. Then we get to Russia. These pictures are actually from the same LARP. In Russia, reenactment is really big. There are also many genres. There are games ranging up to week-longs. There are in the Nordic countries as well, but they have really big games in Russia. And Russia is probably the largest LARPing community in the world, but the one that, in general, people know least about, because it's so hard to read up on the Russian LARPs, because it's hard to read Russian. So they have a huge player basis in Russia. It's a really big country. The picture is from a Fallout LARP, and in some Russian tradition, LARP is more of a combat sport, and they are not very obsessed with this combat sport being very safe. So breaking bones and serious injuries are quite common in those styles of LARPing. And also I've heard about LARP with people like firing with real ammunition when they're reenacting like Second World War things, stuff like that, like over their comrades' heads.
I get curious because I'm doing some karate, and exactly what you learn is not to hurt somebody and get controlled and whatever. So seeing from a combat side, I think this is bloody. Only if you're first beginner you hurt everybody.
Yeah.
The black belts.
Well, I haven't LARPed in Russia myself. So.
There are films you can see on YouTube. They tend to circulate among other LARPers in other countries as kind of horror movies, where people watch them and just.
And if you search for Russian LARP and it's like Storming the Gate or something like that, where there are just a lot of big men in armour battering one another.
Yeah.
And there is no question that people are getting damaged.
There was a LARP this year in Eastern Europe called Ruins of the Warlord Cometh, Ruins of the Crater. Post-apocalypse, a lot of Russian LARPers went to it, which I'm talking about here. And so post-apocalypse, the organiser limited the ammo a lot. So that small faction beaten up to deal with a huge, powerful warlord approaching. And the Russian LARPers didn't like the limitations that the organiser put on them, so they bought their own ammo. And the first into the LARP, they, with a shooting spree, they killed the warlord and all his boys. and a good chunk of the other players, which kind of upset the LARP somewhat. So,
Killed them.
Well, in the game.
In
yes,
the
This
in the
was
game.
not
No,
real
not
ammunition.
in the game. Sorry.
Yeah, good to clarify that.
Yes.
Yes.
And then also an example of LARP hijacking there.
So this is the backdrop for talking about stories and quests, because stories and quests mean different things in different LARPing communities, obviously. But why do we talk about stories and quests in the same breath? Or why have I been tasked to talk about stories and quests? I can only guess on the purpose, but I think that it might have to do with the general idea of stories and quests is finding stuff for the players to do during a game. So when people talk about the stories and the quest of the game, it's like, what did you actually do during the game? And my intention is to give another perspective and another view on this throughout this lecture. Let's start out with quests. Here are two definitions of quests, stolen from the mother of all knowledge, Wikipedia. The first definition is for quests in digital role-playing games. A task that a player-controlled character, party, or group of characters may complete in order to gain a reward. The reward being very often experience points or loot. Or a new quest item triggering the next quest. Also, in literature, we can talk about quest in mythology and literature as a journey towards a goal, serves as a plot device and frequently as a symbol. But that's not very close to what we're talking about. So we're talking about quests more in the digital definition here, at least as a starting point. And in digital games, the number of quests you see, the list, if you would make a list of quests, which I have done, there aren't very many quests. And you could argue that some of these categories may be subcategories to others, or that I should split up some category. But when I've looked around at different lists of what kind of quests does exist in video game, it tends to range from 4 to 8 different types of quests. So we have the kill quest, like find the specific monster or character and kill it. And you have the gather quest, find the thing and gather it, like 10 of these magical flowers. And those two can be combined, like gather 10 dead rats. First you have to kill them. You also have the deliver quest, take thing X to position Y, or person B. The defend quest, either defend a location or defend a character that like you might have to journey with the character. So that could also be a combination, like the defend quest and the deliver quest could be to defend a character whilst the character is journeying through the dangerous woods to town Z. The locate quest, finding something that you're not going to gather, but more or less a certain position on the map. And the interact quest, which is about triggering an interaction either with a character or interacting with a puzzle in order to get a result. So puzzle quests I put under the interact quests. And more or less all of the quests we encounter in digital video games, we could fit them in this list or in some subcategory here. And there's also the chain quest where we make quest chains, of course, starting off as a kill quest, and then when we've killed the big boss, there's like hordes of minions coming, and then it becomes a defend quest because we've freed the prince in the tower or something like that. So we can chain these different quests together. Looking at the typical purpose of quests in digital games, and of course you could, if you have a different opinion, you could raise that, but very usually the quests are categorized into main quests, side quests, and some kind of misc quests, where the main quest is there to drive the story, and of course you gain experience points from them as well, whilst the side quest and the misc quest is for character enhancement. You might gather different pieces to get to be able to put together that super armor that you want for your character, and you also get some experience points doing the side quests. But you could play through the whole game doing only the main quest if you want to, like only explore the main story. So the side quests are optional. Do you agree with this structure, or more or less?
I mean, I know there's quite a lot of discussion about this in looking at video games, but they're also, you can fit them in a certain range of things, but you have games like Civilization, which are quests in a certain sense, but don't fit into a simple combination of different bits or any single bit.
Yeah, and in games like Civilization, also depends on what version of Civilization you're playing. Then you as a player might set up a quest for yourself, like to be able to actually reach the amount of research that I need to conquer that city. So it's not a quest given to you from the game, but a quest you set up for yourself, more or less. I'm just talking here in this.
But this is digital roleplay games, isn't it? Not all
Yeah.
digital games.
Not all digital games.
What about random encounters?
Yeah, doesn't they fit into this? Well, yeah, well, of course you get experience points from random encounters, but then they're not labeled as quests.
Well, it's an element of the game which doesn't fit the quest model. I was also thinking of something like in Skyrim you can randomly be infected with the vampire disease. It's not a quest that you're given, it's not a quest you have to act on as such.
It's a story arc, though, isn't it? It's a trigger to a piece of story that is optional.
Yeah,
And you as a
more or
player
less.
can choose to follow
Also,
it to the end, or take another route to remove it.
yeah. Also, the werewolf quest in Skyrim is the same. Like you could follow.
Well, the werewolf quest is more of a traditional quest because you have to follow quest steps to get there. Vampire thing, you randomly fight a vampire, he affects you in the combat.
Yeah,
it's
but it
unscripted.
triggers some kind of storyline. If we look at this way of categorizing quest, it's quite applicable to US mainstream fantasy LARPs, because we can use very much these same types of quests for the same purposes. Like the main quest in a US mainstream fantasy LARP campaign would be about the story and the XP, and then you could also do instances of side quests to enhance your character to the next level so that you become a little better for next week when we're going to play the LARP again. So it follows a bit the same structure, is what I'm arguing. But it's quite useless for Nordic LARP because of the disinterest in experience points. So then this categorization doesn't work for that, but I'm not saying that we don't have quests in Nordic mainstream fantasy LARPs. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, because I mean, character enhancement doesn't necessarily just have to be experience points. It could be experience. And I'm wondering if you go back to the slide about quests, whether those definitions can be applied to the black box experiences.
Yes, it will actually reappear in 2 slides again. So I'll save that one for that. In a Nordic style fantasy game or any other game, maybe a black box game, the quests are designed to bring stories forward while being entertaining. But what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at the quest list again, then we could actually use the exactly the same quests, but removing the layer of experience points. So we could have a gather quest or a delivery quest for someone to find the book of the Archbishop and deliver it to the magical merchant, because in the book we reveal something new about the story, but no one gains experience from it. It just drives the story forward. Or we could have a great big puzzle, and when we've solved that puzzle, for instance, in one of the fantasy LARPs that I was at, one thing was that in the middle of this fantasy LARP village that we LARPed in, there was a big stone, and when we started digging up the stone, because it was in the middle where we were going to build a road, we found out that the stone was an actual stone that they had digged down before there, covered in old runes, and deciphering those runes led to well, like one of the main story arcs in the that fantasy LARP, and that was an interact quest in essence, but it had nothing to do with experience points.
Well, in the Long Live the Revolution yesterday, we had all those quests. In all the different groups, I think we had all those different kinds of quests.
Yes.
We had a kill quest, a gather quest, we had all of them.
Yeah, but the reason why I'm hesitating is that I'm going to put up a slide later on. It's like 20 quests from Long Live the Revolution. So I think we'll save it for then, and then we can talk about it when we reach that slide. So this opens up a whole new can of worms. Will the players even find the quest? Will they find it meaningful to their character or just ignore it? If so, is there a risk play will be hindered elsewhere? Is there redundancy in the system? If no one actually thinks it's a good idea to build the road through the village, because as LARP rights, they counted on us wanting to build that road in the first place, being able to find that stone, interacting with that puzzle, triggering that main story. Do we have redundancy for that? So even if we're playing without the experience point layers, we have like a whole new set of problematics because we want it to be rewarding and meaningful to their character and their immersion and things like that. So even though we're using the same types of quest, we might have to design them differently. It can't just be a magical book with blank pages that is a symbolic item to deliver to give XP. It has to actually be something meaningful in it in order to enhance the story or enhance the interpretation of the character or something.
Because
like
they might choose not to deliver it, they might just keep it.
Yeah. So the purpose of quests differs in different LARP cultures, and you have to know your context. Did anyone actually have a kill quest in Long Live the Revolution? That was given before the game started.
The revolutionary soldiers were meant to be hunting out nobles and killing them. The actual goal that was stated was a deliver quest. Actually, finding the nobles and. I don't know, but if you heard it in the last scene, Trafford wasn't actually going to kill Harry, but arrest him and bringing him to Paris. So it was a delivery quest that couldn't be executed within the time frame of the LARP, because Paris doesn't exist in that LARP, since we couldn't leave that room. But it was a delivery quest. So, moving on to story. Oh, yes.
Just a quick question. You're talking about different LARP culture. Are the LARP structures inherently different, or is it just a question of balance between the different elements? So if you look at, for instance, you look at cinema, for instance, and you've got the American summer, Hollywood summer blockbuster, it's very, very focused on the story and the characters, you know, Tom Cruise on the bike or in jet or in a NASCAR car, you know. Yeah. It's always the same story, just. But if you look at more European kind of cinema, it's very often the story itself, not much really happened, but the characters evolve a lot. So it's like more character versus story. Is that not, from what you described, is not the same kind of thing where US LARP seems to be more about the characters and Nordic more about the story, or is it totally different?
Well, you two want to say something? I'm going to let you in on it.
Because I think there's something more than that. With both films, you're still watching a film. So what your brain does is watch a film. The thing with the LARPs is what your brain does is different.
Right.
In each country. So it's not just the genres, the characters and things, but what your brain is doing while you're playing is different. Whereas no matter the genre of film, you're still taking in the images of the film and processing them.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that the example I would use wouldn't be Hollywood and European. It would be mainstream cinema and porn, where you're using the same medium, but you have very different purposes with the dramatic curve. Because in the pornographic movie, you wanna, like, everything is just, all the parts that aren't sex scenes are just kind of like trying to get the film to the next sex scene. So the purpose of that film is to have sex scenes, while the purpose of a mainstream film or like European and Hollywood cinema would be to tell a story, and they are more similar on a dramatic curve level.
Right. Okay. That's an interesting analogy. That was an analogy that they used to describe video games for one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where basically video games were the equivalent of
Yeah,
in cinema because all that mattered was the action. Really.
Yes.
Yeah, and the
And that's true for
cutscenes
some
are just
parts.
like cutscenes to the next part where you can actually interact in a video
Yes.
game.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think also balancing the quest and what you put into the quest are different than like in the Nordic fantasy LARP and in the US fantasy.